Create with Fran Sidney. Hello everyone and welcome to Create with Franz. Today we have a really important guest, somebody who can really help you to understand a lot of little details about healing and moving on with your life, and sometimes a real understanding of what's going on in your life and why do you have a problem. So sometimes we have problems. That's why we have this podcast, right? We might have a chronic disease, we might have heartache, we might have something that is not going away. Sometimes we go to a therapist because maybe it's not just physical, it's something emotional. At a time, just a little bit of art therapy can help. So there are literally so many modalities for moving on and for feeling different and for changing the perception of the pain that we have of our situation and looking at it from a different angle. And this is what I want to talk about today with our friend Mark Earlix, and he's gonna talk to us about a very, very special way of healing and moving on, and a special way of understanding. So bear with me as I introduce you to Mark, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me here. And I work with healing, and it's my gift, my goal, and my tool. And I've been working with it for maybe about 25 to 35 years. And it's just a modality that I can utilize with touch and non-touch. I've had 25 to 35,000 people over the years that I've worked with and taught. And I feel that everyone has the ability to utilize what I do teach and what's been given to me as a gift. But the gift is to be able to help others realize that they too can do it. And that's my only place in life. So in any case, when a person comes to me and say if they have an injury, what I do is I'll put say if they were coming to me, I put my hands on them or not, either way, because I know that there's a spirit that's moving through that's carrying the activity of it all. And what I do is I pray within myself, realizing that there's so many various religions out there, there's ways of life and stuff like that. So I keep everything pretty much honed in within me. And what I'll do is see the perfection of it. And in watching and observing that perfection, I have to empty myself. That means becoming objective and observant versus thinking. And I don't work anything out. I don't change anyone. I let their bodies take over. Say if someone has a shoulder injury, what I'll do is I'll put my hands on it and I'll look within myself to find that perfection of it. And then I'll have like indicators come forth from them and come forth from me, and it meets in between and it gives me a sensation. And in that sensation, I'll feel something similar to what I refer to as the breath of God or the dance of life in the person. And in that immediate area, I know that something's been corrected from being distraught or from being inflamed or being injured in some way or another. And then after I find the consistent flow of that correction, then I'll just take my hands away. And it may take, 5 seconds all the way up to maybe 30 seconds in working with a person in any specific area of their body, from head to toe. It doesn't matter. And I'll feel in that the breath of life in that person. And most people, not everyone needs to, but most people will also sense almost like a breathing within them and inside their body. That's where the injury was inhibited. Now it's free. And a person will actually feel better most often. Most people tell me that something in their life has changed, and that's all that matters to me. I don't diagnose, I don't prescribe, and I don't tell anyone they're healed. I let people pretty much tell me what's happened with them afterwards. And working and teaching with 25 to 35,000 people over the many, many years that I've been doing this, most people will tell me that something in their life has changed, and that's all that matters. Sometimes what happens is that, say the shoulder might be injured, and it might be a pattern going back all the way through their childhood. And sometimes I'll have a perception of something that they've been through, a shock trauma in their life. And then it might come to me, I might see it. And I'll give you an example. There was a fellow that came to me many years ago. First story this popped into my head. And this fellow says, hey, my knee's been bothering me. He was about maybe in his upper 40s or lower 50s in age. And it's just been, it was bothering him for years, and it's getting worse. And then he's right there, and I'm working on it. I couldn't figure out, how to help this fellow at first. Then all of a sudden it pops into my head. I see what is called geographically the Alps, and I saw mountains with snow. And I'd never been to the Alps myself, and I didn't know if he skied or anything, but I'm seeing a picture of him skiing in the Alps. And so I took my hands away and I said, Steve, what is this? All I'm getting is that, you injured yourself in the Alps. Then he says, oh my God, I remember that about 20 years ago. And there was this older gentleman that was, I was going downhill skiing, and there was a tree over to the left, and he knew he was going to dodge that real easily. And this older gentleman was bending down, fixing his skis, and he couldn't avoid him, and he went over him, and the fellow wasn't even conscious of any of this stuff, the older gentleman, but he went over him and fell and injured his knee. And so then all of a sudden, the shock trauma in his body that I was working on, it just corrected itself. And he no longer had the shock trauma stored in his body. And the injury was able to heal. Sometimes I'll perceive these things. Other times I'm not. And the times that I'm not, it's just none of my business. I've even kept going deeper and deeper into people at times, and I just felt the energies moving through, and there was I didn't get an understanding what caused it, and sometimes I would get it like a voice in my head that said, "It's none of your business, Mark. Just keep on working." And so I kept on working, and that helped situations in various people. So sometimes I'll see things, sometimes I won't. Yes.
Well, guys, if you are not very focused now, there is a problem, right? This is why you call yourself a healer by the grace of God, because you're not doing the healing. You allow the Creator to do
Correct.
that and to guide you. Although you told me that sometimes the healing is not supposed to happen or not in that time, because there is a reason for that. There is a reason for that experience that we have. Is that something you would like to expand on?
Yes. Matter of fact, I've always known it's never had anything to do with me. And some people call it the old man or old woman upstairs, and I'll jokingly say that at times. Other times, people call it consciousness or God consciousness or God or nameless one, whatever. God does not care. I refer to it as God. And God does not care what you call it as long as you're coming to it. And in order to come to it, though, we have to let go of ourselves. And that's when the objective, observant behavior within me comes out, is when I'm working with a person, knowing that it's not me. I'm not doing a darn thing. And my place is just to be utilized for this to happen. through the person. And I'm always in wonderment. And that's what I teach in a lot of my classes pertaining to spiritual healing or intuition or anything else of various spiritual modalities. And what I'm sharing with people is that we have to get ourselves out of the way. And that's the only thing that really matters. There's many people out there that are healers, but oftentimes what happens, and I'm not poo-pooing them because they're valid in what they're doing, no matter what modality it is, because there's something for everyone. But most often, most people that have that gift waiting for them inside, and they've been shown that they have the ability to work with these things, most often what will happen is they'll have one experience or two experiences or a few experiences, but then it kind of washes away and fizzles away after a while. Or they make one great experience and they get stuck in that understanding of what just happened, and they're not able to break themselves out and allow something to happen and come forth from them, because it's not them doing it. We take it personal quite often and say, oh, I just had this great healing that happened, whatever. But then they cut themselves off and they're not allowing that divinity to come forth anymore. So the whole idea is to be innocent in some sense. And to, when we're unaware, when we first tried it, we didn't know what was going to happen. So we're trusting something else to take over for us. And that's what's important. And that's, I think, the main ingredient is trusting something else. And that's the divinity within, the godliness within, that we live with. Not that, oh, I'm in God or God's in me. That's true, but we live with God. And everything is available for us in that mind of that godliness, that divinity, that super consciousness. And all we have to do is let go of ourselves enough to be able to say, okay, show me more or tell me more. And that's what I teach in all the classes and I work with in all the appointments and the healing circles, etc.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. That is really very explanatory how the system works. And I wanted to attach something because in our pre-podcast chat last week, you talked about the possibility that in some people there is a lack of love, self-love. And as a therapist, sometimes as a coach, I see that. So I'm giving a session to somebody for a problem, but then we realize that the problem is the top of the iceberg, but the deep down, the root cause of the problem is this person doesn't love himself or herself. They hate themselves, hate their body, or maybe they think they're not good enough, they're not smart enough, nobody loves them. And that creates a huge amount of issues mentally. So
Yes.
Is that something that you've ever encountered in your work?
Yes. Yeah, that comes in many, many forms. One of the forms is through lack of confidence in our lives. And it's what I do is whenever I teach or hold events or whenever I'm working with someone or on an online event, a healing circle or whatever, I've learned in myself through the confidence is to not prepare. It's almost like I'm putting myself in a position where I'm helpless. And so I won't prepare. And I have confidence in myself that I'm trusting something else. And I always, within myself, saying, you know, like most people say, oh my God, help me in this, you know, I'm going to sweat this out. But I've learned to accept that this godliness, divinity is going to be doing it. I have nothing to worry about. And so why am I even bothering to prepare? for anything. And so I leave it to the direction of the Spirit to take over, and the Spirit carries the activity. And I'm in wonderment, I'm in awe when this activity happens. And I could be standing there and I'll feel for myself, my own personality, I'll freeze up. I won't know what to say or how to say it, but I know that I have to start talking. So I start talking, and then the Spirit moves through. The Spirit carries the activity. It's just like in the old days, people used to say, oh, the Spirit of 76. And well, the Spirit carried the activity of the year 1776 or whenever. And so there was a lot to happen. And it did it for me. And that's where the trust comes in. That's where the love comes in, where you're enveloped or it's enveloping you. And there's nothing to be worried about or concerned about anymore. We have these times in our life. Another aspect of that is we have these times in our life that we're getting down because there's nothing happening in our lives, and or something's not working out correctly, so we get down, we get depressed. Well, in reality, what's really happening in those times is we've started to go up this to a plateau because everything was going so great and we're so happy, we're so feeling blessed or whatever, and everything's working out perfectly. And then all of a sudden we crash and we find ourselves in like a depression. But maybe, just maybe, that depression is really is a gift, because we get to integrate everything that's happened when we were going up, and we don't have to be as depressed if we can realize that everything is being integrated within us that we just experienced. So that time, I should say, delineates a time to go within, a time to be quiet. And when we are crashing, instead of getting bent out of shape or distorted within ourselves and our minds and our thinkings, maybe that time is for us. And we can integrate and process everything that's just happening if we're just quiet. It may last for 5 minutes. It may last for, who knows, a full day, that quietness, where we don't have to have a lot of superfluous chatter or depression coming upon us. And then we find that the depression time, or that downtime, I should say, lasts so much shorter in its time frame than we would normally be in our depression. And we start to go again almost immediately. So I just think that's interesting in that process.
So there is a reason for all this stuff that is there to make us stop and think. There is a reason. So we always want to look not just at the result, but what's going on here. And we're drawing to the close. We have about 10 minutes, and I'm sure that if the audience could come and ask you a question, maybe say, oh, what do you suggest I do? And maybe you have some tips that you have learned from working with so many people and see who's go better and why. And what was, tell us something positive that helps people and something that makes them so that they cannot get better. In your opinion, what is helpful and what is not helpful?
All right. What's not helpful is to keep on going, becoming complacent in our lives, where we think that something is not working in our life. And that's a mindset. That's something that we were taught. That's something that we learned in life. The other side of the coin is, and that keeps everything going. But the other side of the coin is realizing that, oh, I have, my arm hurt. So if the arm hurts, what I do is I'll put my hand on my arm and I'll imagine that there's an energy coming out of me, and there's also an energy coming out of my hand. And if I can take myself out of the picture and imagine that I'm someone else working on me, then I'm being objective and observant. And what I do is I'll imagine the emanations coming out of the discomfort that a person might be hurting with, and the emanations coming out of my hand. If I'm objective and observant, I can imagine that, which means to image in action, not fantasy, and it's just imagination, and it's not pretend. So in my imagination, to image in action, I'm watching the energies coming out of the person, coming out of me, my hand. And I'll watch inside that person, or in myself, I should say, the injury inside correcting itself. And that's exactly what I do. And then for a moment or 5 minutes or for a half an hour or a day, it won't bother you anymore until we start to think about it again. So it's the thinking that's really disturbing us and keeping us in that mindset. And it's regenerating the injury, or it can regenerate the health, where something inside is feeling better and it will be corrected because it's being shown something else that it doesn't have to suffer anymore, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So what we think is actually more important than we realize.
Yes.
There is a power in our thoughts.
Yes, always, always. And that also affects the body. It affects the biology. It affects the neurology. It affects the skeletal system. It affects the psyche. It affects everything. And most often, we can eliminate the discomforts that we're experiencing in life. It's just like, if you don't feel good, then, say in your abdominal cavity, maybe it's something that you ate. You can work with your stomach as well, it being perfect. It will affect it to varying degrees upon your ability to focus and to work with this and to learn to accept that this might be real until we start thinking again. Then it catches up to us. It's like a little child that runs up to us. No, you're hurting. And we can say, nope, step aside. I'll be right back. You don't want to tell it to, stand in the light, or you don't want to, because that's resisting. That's negating it. And what you want to do is not resist it, but, watch something different happening within yourself. And then it may last for 5 minutes, the healing. And then you just go back to it and say, no, I told you to stand over there. I'll be right back. So we can do these things.
So it is true what in coaching, Tony Robbins and all these big people, they always say, you get what you focus on. And the energy goes where the focus is. Isn't it true? If you hurt yourself and you keep looking at your hand that you just hurt, it will hurt a lot more. But if you are busy because maybe you got hurt while you are getting off the car because you're running to an appointment, you won't even think about it because you're running to the appointment. And so the thing is diminishing, isn't it? So where we are focused, we're going to get all the energy, all the attention, and the intensification of these feelings and maybe discomfort. And that's quite interesting. It doesn't matter which modality, is always the same theme coming back. Hey?
It's also realizing that now, coming from a non-religious place, it's also realizing that every single word, every thought, and every action is our living prayer. So why not be conscious of what we're thinking, what we're doing, and what's coming out of our mouth. And if we're conscious of that, we see that quite often, whatever's in our head and our thoughts and what's coming out of our mouth are destructive thoughts. So why not make them constructive by being conscious of them? And we have that ability to literally be conscious of every word, every thought, every action, because that's our living prayer. That's what we're expecting in life. Even if we're talking against another person or thinking against another person, it's something that's also developing within us. Everything, I had a teacher once tell me, every single thing that you think about another person that you dislike, it's also about you, either that has been, is, or potentially will be. And it's the same thing in the things that we admire about another person. So it's finding the admiration, the gift in the other person that we also have within us, either has been, is, or potentially will be. And it affects our bodies.
Yes, these are words to really consider, right? Thinking the present, the past, and the future. They're always on the same plane for our Creator. He can see all. And we have a possibility to play with this stuff, to really play with it and say, hey, if I control my thoughts, I can control my actions and I can control the results a lot better than just having this inordinate, negative stuff, all mixed, confusion.
Yes, totally. And it's greater than the power of positive thinking. It's greater because you'll see how your life changes, not in a scary way, but in a joyful way. And we're finding that there's more gifts in the world and in the people that are in our environment and in our lives as well. Most important, that affects our bodies as well. This is just one form of healing, but it's very effective if we can catch ourselves in every word, every thought, every action.
Yeah. Well, if we say something wrong in our mind, we can always say, no, wait a minute, I'm going to change that into something more powerful and more productive. And that is one of the big things with anxiety sufferers and one of my big specializations.
Oh my gosh.
Anxiety, you believe everything wrong and you catastrophize and you make it bigger and bigger. Stop listening to that and change it into something different.
Yes, and with the anxiety, most often I find that with just about everyone I've ever worked with, it's coming from anxiety, worry, or fear, that the anxiety, worry, and fear are just excitement that hasn't been expressed and doesn't know how to be expressed.
Interesting, isn't it? Perception, how we view everything from a different angle.
Yeah.
We only have 2 minutes, so I have to close this. But I do want to, I'm sure that somebody will say, okay, where is this Mark Earlix? I want to read more of what he does. I want to see him. I want to talk to him. I want to work with him. I want to find out who it is. So, who this person is, and maybe there is somewhere where you can be found. Can you tell us?
Yes. I have a website, Mark Earlix, MarkEarlix.com. And I have a telephone number that's 888-380-6388. And let's see what else. I do a lot of Facebook, and if people request to join my Facebook, it's Spiritual Healing with Mark Earlix. And I have a free online healing circle on Facebook on Tuesdays, most Tuesdays, and also where people get to ask questions of a spiritual nature pertaining to healing or coming from or whatever. And that's called The Gathering. That's once a month. That's free on Facebook as well. And if you sign up, I have an assistant in Canada that helps people. And her email is admin@markearlix.com.
That's great. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you and to work out what is this new modality. Really, it's prayer and letting the person who created you to take care of this. And of course, not always. It's the case that we get healed because there is something else that has to happen. Our growth is more than being perfect and having the perfect health, perfect everything. And sometimes we need those challenges so that we can become who we are supposed to become, the strong person.
And finding out, and finding out the gift in many things that we experience.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes there
Which
is
lesson?
A big gift, and we have to think about what is the gift in this. Oh, I'm so angry. Could it be that this is not what you think is actually your gift? And
Right.
that could be a question to go to bed with tonight. Is this challenge a gift? I want to leave you with this, everyone. So thank you, Mark, for being with us. And
Thank you.
I hope to hear a lot of questions about this episode today. And thank you so much, everyone, for being with me today. It's only 31 minutes, so lots of good questions about healing and loving ourselves and understanding what real healing is. And so I hope that you will be with me even next week with the next episode. But so far, if you found this episode useful, you can share it, you can like it, you can write a good review to help me to be more visible and to help Mark so he can also be visible and help more people. So thank you, everyone, and take care. Bye-bye. You've listened to Create with Fran Sidney.